Welcome to EyE on You. The year 2021 marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of CPC and the starting point of the 14th Five-Year Plan for Development. It aims to build a modern socialist China as well as comprehensively deepening reform, advancing the rule of law and guiding the country to a new journey. I believe we have the responsibility to tell the true story of China to the world and let the world know better about China. This is exactly why we have this program, EyE on You, EyE on China.
Over the years, CPC has achieved great success economically and socially. We can see that China has scored complete victories at fighting against absolute poverty. On the other hand, if we look at Shanghai, in comparison to New York, we can surprisingly find that the life expectancy in Shanghai is 83 years old, while that in New York is 79 years old. Then, if we look at the infant mortality rate in Shanghai, it is a lot lower than that of New York. Public security in Shanghai is 10 times better than that of New York. And interestingly, the median of household wealth in Shanghai is higher than that of New York. We can see that China, led by the CPC, has greatly improved people's life.
Yes, Edward. Today is our great honor to invite Mr.黎棟國, the former Secretary for Security and members of CPPCC, who is very experienced in government governance and China affairs. Hello, welcome Mr. Lai.
My pleasure to come.
Hello, Mr. Lai. As you have joined the government since 1973 and you have witnessed the changes of public administration before and after the handover, can you share with us what you see in the changes in governance in Hong Kong?
Well, under the basic law of Hong Kong, the system of Hong Kong remained unchanged for a period of 50 years up to 2047. So from this perspective, the structure of the Hong Kong SAR government will remain unchanged. But you see, there are new developments day and day. So the government itself has to change, to make changes to suit the current circumstances. So in this connection, there should be quite a lot of changes that has to be introduced. If we look back, starting from 1997, we witnessed quite a lot of crises. Take health problems as an example. Very soon after the reunification, we have witnessed the bird flu, right? And then it's followed by SARS. And it's followed by swine flu. Right. And now we have the COVID-19 pandemic. Wherever we come across this kind of health problems, this kind of crisis, how are we going to react? How is the government going to lead the people of Hong Kong to react? That's a very, very important issue. As we have seen from what the government has done in the past, it gradually changes its tactics, the way they handle all these crises. And you see, just take COVID-19 for example. At the very beginning, we said that we are well prepared for that. But unfortunately, this is not the case, right? So we witnessed 4 different waves. Up to now, the 4th wave lasts for more than 6 to 7 months. But the threat is still here. We have to rely upon vaccination. But very unfortunately, the vaccination rate is relatively low. And everybody has to come up with brilliant ideas how to tackle this problem, attract more Hong Kong residents to receive vaccinations. So the government has to take the lead to keep pace with the actual situation and to make changes. The American former President Obama, his election slogan is change. Well, in Hong Kong, under the basic principle of 50 years remains unchanged, we still have to conduct a lot of changes so that we can go with pace with the current developments.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Lai, Another question that I'd like to seek for your opinion is that the CPC has pledged to improve the living standard in Hong Kong. How would you describe Beijing's comprehensive governance over Hong Kong?
Well, there's quite a lot of misunderstanding that under the one country, two systems concept, principle, Hong Kong people rule ourselves. But this is in fact not the case. Firstly, Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China. If you take a look at the Basic Law, Article number 1 states very clearly.
Right.
And Hong Kong SAR is established under Article 31 of the Chinese Constitution. So our basis of the Hong Kong SAR comes from the Constitution and the Basic Law. The Chinese government, as the ruling party of the country, of course, it has the power. Indeed, it is their duty to rule Hong Kong in accordance with the law laid down. So where's the law? The law is the Constitution. The law is the basic law of the Hong Kong SAR. Every power that the Hong Kong SAR political institution that it has comes from the authorization of the central government through the basic law. So the central government has the whole power of ruling Hong Kong SAR. You see, under Article 12 of the Basic Law, Hong Kong enjoys a high degree of autonomy and is directly under the central authorities. It is a special administrative region. Of course, under the country, Hong Kong is only part of a country. It's an inalienable part. So as a sovereignty, the central government naturally, and it is its responsibility to rule Hong Kong in accordance with the Constitution, in accordance with the Basic Law, and any other decision or law made by the NPCSC.
And also that the central government will continue to exercise the comprehensive governance to safeguard the national security in Hong Kong. So what do you say about it?
Well, they should have done so. You see, under Basic Law Article 23, the Hong Kong SAR is duty-bound to enact national security laws, right? But after 24 years, we are still unable to accomplish our duty and responsibility under the Basic Law. And we all know what happened in 2019, right?
Yeah.
The situation has deteriorated to such an extent that the central government must take actions to restore the law and order and to protect the national security, right? So they decided to enact a national security law for Hong Kong under Article 18 of the Basic Law. And then it added to the Annex 3 of the Basic Law, and it is promulgated by the Hong Kong SAR government to become a piece of law that is applicable in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think it's more effective than the way how we are going to enact for the Article 23.
Of course, it's much more effective. For example, if the Hong Kong SAR government now wishes to enact this national security law, firstly, you have to conduct a kind of consultation. Look what happened in 2003, right? After 2019 riot, do you think that Hong Kong can withstand this kind of Hong Kong-styled consultation? Would it bring about disturbances? I think the answer is extremely clear.
Yeah.
Right. So, in this case, the central government decided to enact the piece of law through the NPC decision as well as the NPCSC legislation process. There's much straight and simple way to achieve the desired result. Secondly, the national security law enacted by the NPCSC has a higher standing than local legislated laws, right? So in case of conflict, the national security law will prevail. And it can show the force of the law. Of course, at the end of the day, it's the court who decide on cases and make a decision whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. The common law system in Hong Kong still operates as what is laid down in the national security law. There's nothing to fear about.
Yeah. So if we change the topics from the national security to the constitutional order in Hong Kong, like a few years ago, we have all the discussions among in LegCo or among the public that whether in Hong Kong we have separation of power or whether it's an executive-led government. So of course, from recently there is a court case in Court of Appeal that they confirm that apart from the division of responsibility among different branches of political structure, the basic law envisages an executive-led system in Hong Kong. So as we all know that patriots are going to rule Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So how patriotism can secure the smooth running of the executive-led government in Hong Kong?
Well, first of all, I think all civil servants, they should be abide by the law of Hong Kong. They should devote themselves fully to their duties to serve the people of Hong Kong. For the chief executive and his bureau secretaries, they are responsible for making policy decisions. These policy decisions have to be carried out by other civil servants. They should act as a party, and they should devote themselves fully, on the one hand, to implement all the policies. And on the other hand, they have to, in consultation with LegCo members, district court, district councils, and hear the views of the people. After all, whatever policy the government has been adopted or is going to adopt should focus on the well-being of the people of Hong Kong. You see, look at the central authorities. They have a slogan, serve the people. We serve the people. Right. The Hong Kong SAR government have to serve the people of Hong Kong to maintain the prosperity of Hong Kong as well as its stability, to make contributions to the country for its modernization and further development. So, in a nutshell, if every stakeholder within the government take the lead and work together for the well-being of the people of Hong Kong, it fulfills all the requirements. We are all patriotics. Whatever views I hold or you hold is exactly the same.
Yes, some says that patriotic is rather vague terms. So, Mr. Lai, as what you have said just now, is a very clear term on how are we going to be a patriotic person.
Well, if you don't like it, you say that this is a vague concept, whatever, right? But in reality, every Hong Kong resident living in Hong Kong, what they are hoping for, they are longing for, a stable life, right? Our daily lives will go on as usual. That's what we want. Everybody should work towards this target. And since we all support the Hong Kong SAR system, and this system was promulgated by the central authorities, and then of course we support the country, so we are all patriotics.
Yes, Mr. Lai, you have explained that civil servants who, with the principle of political neutrality, can show patriotism. Lately, we hear that there are calls for reform in the civil service system. How do you think the reform shall be done?
Well, lots of work can be done, and I believe that it should be done in a gradual manner. Now, firstly, we all know that every serving civil servant is required to either make a declaration or to swear allegiance to uphold the basic law and the Hong Kong SAR, right? Okay, everybody has done that. And so far, according to the news reports, there are about 200 former civil servants who have decided not to sign the declaration and they left the civil service. As a civil servant, the primary duty is to abide by the law, to carry on his duty faithfully, to support the government policy and carry out its policy. But very sadly, the term political neutrality has been misquoted, misused on a number of occasions. Some people tend to believe that this term means that I can say, I can do whatever I like. Very sorry. As a civil servant, you have a duty, that is to implement faithfully the government policy. And for more senior civil servants, they even have to defend the government policy. Of course, if they have certain views, they can express their views. But expression of a personal will is not equivalent to failure to faithfully implement your duty to carry out government policy. They are two separate issues, right? So, as a first step, everybody has to sign a declaration, or some even have to swear allegiance. This is only the first. The second, the government should provide more trainings to all civil servants so that they can understand much better what they are required to do about their performance, etc. And in addition to provide them training, they have to monitor all civil servants' performance to ensure that they are acting in accordance with the law, in accordance with the laid down policy, in accordance with the established procedures and instructions. Put it in a nutshell, their duty is to serve Hong Kong people in accordance with the law. That is their duty. And the government is duty bound to take the lead, to ensure that all its employees are performing properly. That is not an easy task, but this is a task that the government should never fail.
Right. There's another question that I'd like to seek for your opinion. For some local groups that advocate hatred against the CCP, what do you think?
It's totally wrong. It's really wrong. Why do they advocate this kind of idea? Perhaps some of them has been misled, so we have to do quite a lot to clarify the situation, right? And it is not an easy job, frankly. No one can say that he can persuade everybody to accept his will. But truth always comes if you have courage enough to come up and deliver the correct message. If more and more people come up to deliver these messages, people will gradually understand. Look at the Chinese Communist Party. They have ruled the country for 100 years, a century. Well, let us compare what the situation was when the party was formed and now 100 years later. Back 100 years, there are so many very, very poor Chinese living in the country. And now we are very proud that we have made a public declaration, promulgation, that we have left poverty. Back 40 years, under the leadership of the Communist Party, the country embarked on a very rough road of modernization. Up to now, China is the world's largest manufacturing factory. We have the largest population of middle class. People's livelihood has totally been changed completely. We have the longest highways. We have the longest high-speed railways, the largest number of bridges.
Right.
We are one of the leading countries that widely use hydropower, that widely use nuclear power. All this improved the livelihood of our people. What a magnificent achievement that the Communist Party has got for the past century.
Yes.
Well, this is something true. I think we all should make use of all the chances available to tell our friends, our relatives, and all other people in the rest of the world. Look at China. Look what really has happened here. If you make this for yourself, it's much better than you read a certain report from newspaper.
Thank you, Mr. Lai. Mr. Lai, just now you have mentioned about the centenary. In mainland China, there are a series of centennial celebrations and they are overwhelming. However, in Hong Kong, how would you recommend the Hong Kong government do to promote the centenary, and what kind of message shall be promoted?
I think all government departments, bureaus, should make use of every possible chance to link the centenary promotion with their daily work. That's important. And of course, because the pandemic is here, we cannot make some large-scale gatherings, performance, and all that. But it doesn't mean that in our daily lives, we cannot deliver this message. Everybody with this in mind, I think we can. Because you see, our livelihood is closely related with our motherland. Take, for example, half of the electricity we consumed comes from Taipei, the nuclear plant. The water we drink comes from Dongjiang. The daily necessities, the vegetables, the fresh meat, all come from the mainland. There are a vast majority of materials, stuff that we use, we consume every day, come from the mainland. Even our stock market, the majority of the companies listed in Hong Kong are what we call the red chips, right? In fact, Hong Kong as part of the country, we heavily relied upon the support of the country. Our lives are so closely related with our brothers and sisters in the mainland that it is not possible to artificially separate the two. It's a pity that the pandemic is not yet over. So the flow of people has been curtailed
Right.
to a very large extent.
Right.
But it could not bar us from sharing ideas, from contacting each other through all possible means. We are so closely related with our motherland that in fact we are very lucky. You see, back in Hong Kong, we have such a vast motherland that can help us in case of need. So there's every reason for us to hold a positive view on that.
So speaking of the centenary and patriotism, what is the relationship between loving Hong Kong and upholding the leadership of the Communist Party in Hong Kong?
I think it's only essential parts of an equation.
Mm-hmm.
We live in Hong Kong. Do we love this city? I think the obvious answer is certainly yes. Otherwise, those who don't love the city will have left the city, right? For those who are here, we love the city.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the second question is, what is the status of the city? It's a special administrative region. And the administrative region directly comes under the central government. Okay, let's look at the central government. What is the position of the Communist Party in the political structure of the People's Republic of China? Well, let's look at the Constitution of China. Article 1 states very clearly, leadership by the Communist Party of China is the defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics. In other words, the Chinese Communist Party leads the country's government, right? And Hong Kong SL is coming directly under the central authorities. So it is part of a body. Hong Kong is part of this body, and it is an essential element of this equation. You can't just separate Hong Kong from other parts of China.
Yeah. So, Mr. Lai, I see that you always refer to our constitution in PRC, and also the basic law, and also the national security law, and also what is in the national security law is that it says that the government has a responsibility to educate our people on how the law should be enacted and what is the effect of it. So, what do you say about the promotion and the education value of these laws in Hong Kong? And should we start studying the PRC constitution as well?
Well, the central authorities has repeatedly reminded Hong Kong officials that they should have a very thorough understanding of the constitution, of the basic law, because these two important pieces of law are the backbone of the whole thing. In fact, the constitution itself is not very difficult to understand. It's written in very simple Chinese language. Unless you say that I don't understand, I can't read Chinese characters. Otherwise, you can understand easily what's laid down in the constitution, what's laid down in the basic law. Okay, as for the members of the public, I think that the government should conduct constant publicity. Educate people. What are the important issues under the Constitution? In fact, we don't have to read to study the whole Constitution. There are only a few articles that is specially written for Hong Kong. And for the basic law, there are only 160 articles. It's not a difficult document. For members of the public, I do think that they can understand. But it's a bit unfortunate that in the past 23 years, the government only publicized certain part of the basic law, namely the fundamental rights of Hong Kong residents. We have the freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of expression. We have the right of a vote. Yes, correct. 100% correct. We have all this freedom. But the basic freedom of Hong Kong residents is only a part. Of course, it's an essential part of the basic law. The most important article of the basic law is Article number 1. Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the PRC. That's most important because all our powers are derived and authorized by the CPG in accordance with the basic law. So, as a piece of what people sometimes call mini constitution, you have to accept the whole, but not 1 or 2 articles. You've got to accept the whole. You have to accept that Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the PRC. You have to accept that Hong Kong enjoys a high degree of autonomy. You have to accept that matters relating to foreign affairs, defense, etc., come directly the responsibility of the central government. You have to accept that mainland laws are not applicable in Hong Kong unless they are put into Annex 3 of the basic law and promulgated by way of either local legislation or promulgation to make it becoming effective. So we will accept the whole thing, not only one piece of article. It's a bit sad that in the past, people are being led to what is laid down in Chapter 3. And for other chapters, other provisions, I do believe that we have to do a lot more work. In particular, Chapter 1, the general principles of the basic law. I can ask you, are Hong Kong students from primary to secondary, not to mention our university students, they have lessons on the basic law, not to mention lessons about Constitution, right? So it's a time now, the government, in particular the Education Bureau, they should take up this responsibility, as what I have just mentioned. Under the National Security Law, there's an article stipulating that it's the government's responsibility to do so. How we are going to do that? It's the responsibility of the Education Bureau. They have to do that. In particular, you see, under the existing arrangements, many Hong Kong schools operating full power of autonomy. What they call the school-based policy, right? I think certain modifications should be brought in. At the Education Bureau and the Education Department, they have a responsibility to ensure that schools are giving lessons, are teaching students what is required. That is, what the basic law says, what the constitutional law says relating to Hong Kong. They have to do that. I cannot give you any example that any jurisdiction do not provide national education.
Yeah.
Right.
They do. The Americans do. The British do. The Australians do. The Japanese do. Why Hong Kong does not?
So apart from just reading the law, reading the basic law, how are we going to promote the patriotic education as well for the youth? Because we see that it's been missing for years. Like before the handover, we don't have the national education in this sense. And after 24 years, after the handover, what should we do to improve the situation?
Well, there are quite a lot of vivid and lively examples. What I just mentioned earlier. When you go home, you want to wash your face, you take a bath, you turn on the tap, you have water. In the 1960s, Hong Kong was in great shortage of water, fresh water. So we only got water supply every 4 hours for every 4 days. But after the 70s, we never experienced this. Have you experienced this? No, of course not.
Maybe too young.
Of course not. Why not? Because the mainland has built a very big pipe, and then water from Dongjiang comes through the pipe to Hong Kong reservoirs. So it solved one of our major problems for electricity. If we don't have the supply from Daya Bay, you just can't imagine you can switch off your air conditioner in this very hot summer. Right?
Yeah.
There are vivid, quite a lot of examples. So we have to ask, all these daily necessity stuffs, where do they come from? Is it a must that the mainland authorities have to give all this to you?
Not
Right.
necessarily. Yeah.
Not necessarily. Really not necessarily. Right? So, you start from the very basic, and then you put it back to your theory. Where does it come from? What backs up these? So at the end of the day, you can come to one conclusion. It's the law, it's the system that protects us all. If you love this day, you should treasure the system. And that's patriotism.
Yeah. So as we all know that the Communist Party we have a great confidence over this, and it's all come from the performance in social governance, the economic development, poverty alleviations, safeguarding the sovereignty, fighting against COVID, and the struggling with the West, especially to the U.S. to protect China's interests in recent decades. So for us in Hong Kong, what should we do to counter those pointless complaints and groundless accusation from the outside world?
Come up and speak loudly. Don't be afraid. Tell people the truth. You see, after the disturbances in 2019 and after the enactment of the national security law, the Western media have said that the one country, two system is dead. Are we? We all in Hong Kong here can witness that it is still a very much lively and vivid system. Life is as usual. Tell our friends overseas. Let them see for themselves. After pandemic, we open wide our door. We invite all those who wish to come here to witness themselves, to see what really Hong Kong is. That's important. I have had an experience of talking to a Western reporter, and after having been asked quite a lot of questions, at the end, he told me that, Mr. Lai, I was in Hong Kong in summer 2019, and I witnessed what really happened there. Well, let people see what's really the picture. That's important. Come up. Tell your friends. Don't be afraid. Telling them the truth. There's nothing to afraid about. You do it. Everybody does it. And then we can spread the message loudly, strongly, and confidently.
We should all do that.
Yes, we should all do that.
Yeah.
Under the great leadership of our motherland.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Lai,
Welcome.
for coming for interview today.
Thank you very
and
much.
spending us sharing us very good opinion on the leadership of how do we uphold the leadership of the CPC and the relationship with Hong Kong. So thank you again.
Welcome.
It was very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.